welcome to Yogi's Garage. We're fast approaching the holiday season. It's always difficult for your loved ones to find gifts that you'll like. Initially, I thought about doing a video about my tools and what I use on a daily basis, but I thought also it would probably be better if I just combine the two ideas that I have kicking around in my head, and that is what to get somebody like me who loves tools, loves buying gadgets, and what do I use on a daily basis? Well, that's basically the same thing. So I'm going to show you a few things that I use. I can't show you everything because it's a lot, but I'll show you some of the coolest tools that I have in my garage, and then we can go through some of the things I think you should get your loved ones this holiday season. So sockets are a pretty straightforward investment, although you can go overboard. And take it from me, I went overboard. I bought pretty much every size available from the TEKTON catalog, including some of the larger 38, 44 millimeter sockets. I went one further and got 12-point sockets in 1/2 inch and 3/8. Hindsight, you don't need 12 points in 1/2 inch and 3/8. If your loved one is working on cars, then really all you need is 3/8 and 1/4 inch sockets. The 1/2 inch socket sizes are great for busting large nuts. The 1/2 inch size sockets are great for busting the larger size nuts in the suspension and the transmission areas, but a daily practical tool is typically a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch size. So when you think about that, that limits and reduces the amount of options that you have, and that's really what you're looking for. Sockets can also be shallow and deep. Deep well sockets are really good for projects that require you to spin off nuts that are attached to a really tall threaded stud. If this is going to be a gift, the sizes that you should really consider are going to be anywhere between 8 millimeter all the way up to 24 millimeter. And typically vendors like TEKTON that I do business with, they offer you the complete rail, meaning there's no missing sockets. But in actuality, if you look at what I'm showing you here, the majority of these are hardly ever used. The ones that I use, I put blue nail polish on the marks on the rails where I've taken it off to let myself know that I'm using these on my current project. But it also tells me that, hey, these are the ones that I use for fixing up my Mercedes, for fixing up the Porsche or the Audi. I'm using typically 8, 10, 13, 15, 17, 19, and 24 millimeter wrenches typically, or sockets. So if you're thinking about getting them a specialty socket, I would recommend something that will help them take off and remove the suspension parts. This particular one here has an opening so that you can stick a wrench in there and lock down the Allen key on the top of the stud while you're loosening the nut. That's a typical removal process, and these right here are great for that. Another specialty socket would be a spark plug socket, right? It's typically 3/8 inches, but what's special about spark plug sockets is that there's usually a rubber O-ring or something in there that can grab on to the top of the spark plug so that when you pull it out, the spark plug comes out with the socket rather than just loosening it up and then you having to reach your hand down there and get it. Another specialty socket would be anything that have to do with hex heads, torque, and then lately what I've been seeing is external or inverted torques. So keep that in mind too. These are inverted torques sockets. I use E10 exclusively on the Porsche, but I've used different ones even on domestic vehicles, on a Chevy Sonic. Another specialty socket that I use a lot is the ones for the lug nuts. If you look closely at some of the cars on the road, you may see a bunch of scratches or scuff marks where the lug nuts go, and that's because typically they'll use just an impact socket to pull them off. Another specialty socket would be something like a U-joint swivel. These here, I'm not going to recommend the brand. This brand here is Craftsman, and they're really sloppy and they don't hold position very well. But get yourself a good low profile set of swivels and that'll make your life easier. I can also recommend a spring-loaded swivel. This is what I typically use because I like it to hold position, and the swivels, the U-joint type swivels typically just flop around and it makes it really difficult to line it up. But these metal ones are not only spring-loaded, they're impact as well, so you can get a little extra ooga-dugga when you're trying to break those bolts free. All right, moving on from sockets, let's talk about ratchets, right? Everybody has a ratchet. All your do-it-yourselfers out there probably already have a moderately good set of ratchets. But what they probably don't have are these, and these are swivel-style ratchets. So this thing is capable of swinging 180 degrees in the opposite direction, or you can actually use it like a screwdriver. I use these almost exclusively. They've replaced my flex heads. They've replaced quite a few different ratchets in my toolbox. And like I said, this icon here you can pick up at Harbor Freight. And this other one is made by TEKTON, and unfortunately, TEKTON doesn't make them anymore, but you can find these on Amazon. So speaking of Amazon, I have a bunch of links down in my description below. They're affiliate links, and basically what that means is if you see something that I'm using on my channel and you'd like to pick one up yourself, if you click that link, I'll get a small, and I'll be at really small commission on each one of the purchases that you make, and that helps fund the channel, which helps me fund projects like this very expensive Porsche over here. So if you see something you like, I really appreciate it if you give that little link down there a click and buy it from there. All right, let's move on. Staying on the topic of ratchets, another style, it's not really a ratchet, but it falls into that category, and that'd be a breaker bar. And the best thing to do is get them a 1/2 inch, maybe 18 inch to 24 inch breaker bar. There's no ratcheting feature, it's just the anvil. But it works great to getting those especially on lug nuts. Those things knock them right off real quick if you don't have a power tool. I also have a 1/4 inch stubby ratchet that I like to use. This particular one I call Charlotte after my daughter. It's really small, but you'll notice it fits right in your hand. So if you can get your hand in there, you can get that 1/4 inch socket. And believe it or not, I use the heck out of this. Extensions are a critical part of any toolbox. And the ones that I'm going to recommend to you are a little bit different, and they're called wobble extensions. And the reason why they're called wobble extension is because on the ends of these, the anvils themselves are flared out so that you can pull the socket out one step and it flops around. That gives you just that angle you need to get to that fastener. And I use the wobbles more than any other swivel style attachment on any of my tools. Okay, moving on to wrenches. Wrenches are great. They come in all different sizes. Trust me, I know. I probably own most of them. But a lot of times you don't need all of the sizes that are available. And I'm talking to myself when I say that. You typically want to get boxed and open end, and most of them these days come with a ratcheting mechanism on one end or on both ends, and oftentimes they'll flex. But the ones in particular that I think that your do-it-yourselfer will really like are the angle heads, the angle head open end wrenches. These are from TEKTON, and they give you that awesome 45 degree or 29, I think it's a 45 and a 29 degree angle depending on which end you're using. And believe it or not, that right there is, I can't stress enough how much I love those. Those are my favorite wrenches that I have in my toolbox. They're very expensive, relatively speaking. The ones from TEKTON are made in America, lifetime warranty, but the shape, the fit and finish, totally worth it. If you really care about your loved one, you'll get them those. Oh, the next style that I use a lot of are the offset style, where the bar of the wrench is at one plane and then the actual boxed end is at another plane, giving you that angle that you need to get around, let's say a step down or something. It'll give you that angle that you're looking for. So there are a couple more wrenches that I absolutely can't live without in my garage, and one of them is the ultra thin ones. Believe it or not, the ultra thin ones are used a lot around suspension because you're typically getting around a mount point or something that attaches to the frame of the car, and a normal thickness box wrench oftentimes won't fit. Case in point, the front suspension, I have a video about it. I use those ultra thin wrenches to counter hold the bolt so I can zip the nut right off. So that's a really good one, and they come in a small little pack like this, and they're made by Capri, and you can get those with my Amazon link below. The next ones are made by Mountain, and these are fantastic. Another made in America product. They're swivel ends on both ends, and they have a reverse button on them. And what's interesting about these, besides their length, they're really good for giving you that extra length and that leverage that you're going to get from that. But you'll also notice that it's got a raised lip on one side and not on the other. And I think that's important because that allows you to get that extra bite that you might need on a large nut to pop it loose by using the raised side of it. So I use the heck out of these. I think another good specialty tool for your loved ones would also be stubby ratchets. These here are made by Craftsman, and it has an opened and a boxed end, and it's also ratcheting. But check and look at the size of these things. And believe it or not, there's a lot of times where you need a ratchet, but it's just too big to fit between something inside the car. Well, these stubbies are very, very handy. Speaking of tiny tools, also are this multi-purpose tool here that has the Phillips heads and some hex heads on it, and even a few Torx. And I use this when I'm working on suspension because it fits really, really well inside of the opening of that specialty socket for the suspension, and you can use that to counter hold the stud while you're taking the bolt off. So that's an awesome little tool. And by the way, these are all priced within different price ranges. So you have price ranges on the cheap side, like the one I just mentioned with the multi-tools, and then you can go all the way up to the USA made TEKTON offset heads or the angled heads. Those are more on the pricier side. Some basic tools that I would recommend are really around pliers. Pliers are very handy, specific kinds like vice grip pliers. The ones from Milwaukee here that I'm showing you have the ability to torque down that bite even more by twisting the end of that vice grip and really holding on. The other ones, these Knipex, are fantastic tools. They're made in Germany, and these are the Cobra style, and these guys here hold on to whatever you're trying to loosen up. So be careful because it can damage the part. But if you don't care and you just need to get it loose, these pliers are the best. Another style plier that's kind of a specialty tool is an oil filter remover plier. It's like a metal strap. It's a ring. Very cheap. If you have a small budget, get them an oil wrench pair of pliers because more than likely they may just be using an old seatbelt strap for all you know, or a pair of large crescent wrench. And you get them that, it's a win-win. I think it's under 10 bucks most of the time. That's always nice to have. All right, let's step away from the mechanical tools for just one moment and talk about some of the electronic tools that I have in my garage that I would highly recommend for you to get as a gift for anybody. And one of them is a borescope. And a borescope is very, very handy. It gives you visibility inside of the engine that perhaps you can't get just by looking at it. For example, you can run the borescope into a spark plug hole and look inside of the combustion chamber to see if there's anything wrong with that. I've used this in many of my videos, and that's how I found the blown engine in the Mercedes. One feature that you want to look at, and this is the one that I'm recommending, is this Teslong, where it has two cameras on it. It has one directly on the tip and then one 90 degrees offset so that you can look to the side rather than straight ahead as you're probing. Another good tool, of course, is an OBD2 scanner. All these cars that we work on have computers in them, and they communicate on a standard protocol using a standard port. And nowadays, you can get an OBD2 scanner for 20 bucks, and you can go all the way up to several thousand, depending on what you need it to do. I have several that I recommend. Blue Driver is a really good brand, and it can check to see if your car will pass a smog test. So neat features in that one. And then, of course, my TEKTON, which has a large database of manufacturers and gives me all kinds of functionality around running system tests and diagnostics. So if you really have an egghead techie like myself, then you may want to go for the higher end TEKTON. Or if you have someone that just likes to help people out and clear codes, get them that Blue Driver. You won't go wrong. Another good electronic Christmas gift would be a light, right? Milwaukee makes a really good line of lights, and I'm not getting paid by Milwaukee to say this, but they have a true color light product now that they offer, and the one that I use is the pen light, and the pen light is awesome. It produces a really nice colored light, and it's really bright, and it runs on a rechargeable battery, and it's a perfect size, so you can't go wrong with something like that. If you're looking for more of lighting up an area, like underneath the hood of a car, then the Milwaukee hood clamp style is a really good choice. The batteries are all interchangeable, and that also produces a great light. I don't know if it's on the same level as the True Color. I even use it inside of the cabin of a car because it's wide enough to clip onto both ends of a standard car. Maybe not an SUV, but a car definitely. Okay, moving on to some other electrically powered tools. Let's talk about impact wrenches and electric ratchets. All right, the impact wrench is a really useful tool. I find myself using that one more and more. And this is the M12 smaller one. So I'm getting about 250 foot-pounds of nut busting power. And it works great for just about any use, including lug nuts on a car. Very few times I've had to use something other than this tool to pop a lug nut off. It's not quite strong enough to help tremendously with old rusted suspension. That's why if you have a guy that likes to work on suspension more than anything, then go with the M18 version of this tool. The ratchet is also a great one. I don't use it a whole lot anymore. I do like the 1/4 inch one because it's really fast. One of the main reasons why I don't like it is because it doesn't have a clutch on it, meaning if you're not paying attention and you're just squeezing away on that trigger, it's going to give you the maximum torque the moment it tightens up. So if you're dealing with a small fastener or even a large fastener, it'll do one of two things. It'll rip itself out of your hands and twist your wrist while it's at it, or it'll bust the head off of that fastener. So be careful. Whereas with the gun style, I have it set to the lowest setting. The moment it hits any type of tension, the clutch kicks in and it starts slipping. If getting your loved one an expensive Milwaukee tool is out of your budget, then think about getting them something like a vernier caliper. This caliper here is electronic, so it makes it easy to read. These devices are really good at measuring inside and outside diameters of fasteners, of things that you may need to attach to one another. It's an all-around must-have in your garage. One of the newest things in my garage that I absolutely love, and I use it quite a bit, is my ultrasonic cleaner. The one that I went with is a 10 liter, and if you're a follower of my channel, you've seen me use it in multiple episodes, and it just destroys the oil on your parts. I use oil leader exclusively in that thing, and it cleans the parts to like new. And it's big enough to where you can get connecting rods and pistons in there, larger bolts and fasteners, and some larger parts. But it's not too big to take up too much room on your precious counter space. So that ultrasonic cleaner is great. I got mine. Mine is also heated. So keep that in mind if they're really into cleaning stuff and they like cleanliness and they want to use a tool like this, I would recommend getting a heated one. Next up would be a bench grinder. I went with the larger 8-inch bench grinder, but you can go with a 6-inch. It's a lot cheaper, almost half as cheap. It's great for taking burrs off, to grind off rust, things like that. This is a great tool in any garage. If they can find room for it, I'd recommend getting it. Battery tenders are a great gift idea. The battery tenders that I use, I have a couple of them. I got a Costco one and I got one from Amazon. And they essentially do this. They keep your if you have a car that you don't drive every day, or if you have batteries in your workshop and you want to keep them fresh, get yourself a battery tender or get them a battery tender. And these batteries will stay fresh for years, if not a decade. And on the same note as battery tender, a battery jumping device. Now, the days of needing a pair of jumper cables may be over. All we need really is a battery brick, like something you would get to charge your phone on trips. They come in all different kinds of flavors and all different sizes. So if you're only need to boost a bike, or if you only need to boost a family car, then you can get by with one of the smaller ones, or you can get a slightly larger one like I have, and it's supposed to be able to jump even a long block Chevy engine. So it's pretty darn powerful. A set of dead blow hammers is also a great stocking stuffer. These dead blow hammers are really useful because they have less of a reverb or less of a bounce back. So you get, when you want to hammer on something in the car, you're getting just 1 or 2 hits out of it. It's not going to bounce off of it. and it's a must-have again in any garage. Another must-have would be pry bars. Multiple sets of pry bars, from small ones to 8 to 12-inch pry bars. The ones that I have are made by Gear Wrench, and these have a ratcheting adjustable head so that I can go from a hook style all the way to a reverse hook style. I find these very useful for cracking open cylinder heads, valve covers, and crankcases like on the Porsche. They're really useful. Another useful tool that I think is useful across the board, and it's beyond what it's recommended for, are door panel trim remover tools. Nice and cheap on Amazon. You can get them for like $15 or less in any color you want, and it comes with a bunch of plastic prying tools as well as a larger metal fastener tool to remove fasteners on door panels, to remove stuff on the dashboard. And I use it on my engine when I can't use metal because the metal will scratch it. I'll use the plastic tools to help give me that leverage that I'm looking for. So definitely a good buy there. Mechanics picks are a lifesaver. They're great for taking off O-rings. They're great for scraping off rust. You name it, you can use them. And I would recommend getting a set that have not only the larger ones, but the smaller ones as well. Because believe it or not, those smaller ones come in handy when you're dealing with like piston rings, or you're trying to get something off of the fuel injector, like a seal or something. Those tiny ones give you that tiny little finesse that you're looking for. Every mechanic, every do-it-yourselfer is going to run into a point where the top of the head of the bolt's going to either be stripped out or it's going to come completely off. And a lot of times, if you don't know what to do, that kills the entire project. Well, this tool here is called a rocket socket. It's another made in the United States product, really great designed tool, and it's basically designed to bite into the top of what's left of that fastener, hammer it on to the top of that bolt, use a ratchet or an electric tool to zip that right off, and it is a lifesaver. I've used it for brake rotors, I've used it for exhaust pipes, I've used it for intake, you name it, you're gonna need it. Rocket socket. If you were to get someone like me a tool like this, they'd be like, oh, you've been doing your research. And this would be a smoke machine. The smoke machines are typically designed for helping you find leaks in your intake or exhaust system. It produces a safe smoke. It uses baby oil, I think, and it just heats it up and creates a vapor that you use your air compressor with, and it pumps smoke through your system so you can find where any of the vacuum leaks may be happening. It's a very useful tool. So these two specialty tools are interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. It's a compression tester and a leak down tester. A compression tester is really handy when you're not in your shop and you need to quickly gauge whether or not the engine that you're working on is even producing compression, and you can do that without needing an air compressor. Whereas a leak down tester is more of a precise tool. You partner it up with an air compressor and you're able to measure the exact amount of air each one of the cylinders can hold with compression. Another nice low budget gift would be files, a set of files. This set of files here came in this nice zip bag. Got it on Amazon, and it has all kinds of different size files. It has round files, it has triangular files, it has fine files, and it has rough files as well. So it's very useful, and in this little carrying case, it makes for a great gift. Some really good Christmas stocking ideas would be things like a spark plug gapping tool, a gapping measuring tool. This is really good for when you're working on pistons. You need to measure the gap between something. It's also really good for measuring clearance between two pieces of metal, like a cylinder head and an engine block. That's an absolute must-have. Another great stocking stuffer idea would be a thread pitch gauge. This style here will give you measurements for not only metric but for standard as well. And then you can take those measurements to the hardware store and get the right part every single time. Another nice to have stocking stuffer would be crow's foot. Crow's feet are really useful for trying to get into a real narrow area where the top of your ratchet can't fit in there. You can do it from the side, as well as if you have to torque that bolt. I find myself using this crow's foot whenever I'm torquing in the suspension on a car. If you've ever heard cussing coming out of the garage and you don't know what's going on, it's probably because they probably dropped a bolt into the engine bay somewhere and now they're looking for it. Magnets. A magnet tool is priceless in this situation. The one that I typically use is the thin antenna style. You open it up and it can fit in anywhere, and it has a magnetic tip strong enough to just pick that bolt up. And they come in all different kinds of sizes. Some of them are even illuminated. They even come with borescopes now, so a magnet is always a nice little stocking stuffer. And finally, I think snap ring pliers are also a great tool to give someone. Every now and then we'll come across a snap ring that we need a tool to get it out, and I'm finding myself using them more and more these days, especially when you start working around bearings. And you need to be able to remove the bearing holder, which is typically a snap ring, and these tools are great for that, and they have different kinds for different styles. So if you get them a kit, I'd recommend one like this one from Knipex. All right, if your loved one's been really good this year and he's on Santa's nice list, then this particular gift here is one you should get. And this is over the top, but I love it to death, and I've used it only once, is my piston ring filer that I got from Summit Racing. This is the Rolls-Royce, the Cadillac, the whatever you want to call it version of a piston ring grinder. If they build engines and they're still using mechanical human energy to grind piston rings and you put this under the tree, they will love you forever. I guarantee it. Very handy tool. It knocks out even steel rings really quickly. It's expensive, yes, but are they worth it? You be the judge. Let's talk about the lumps of coal in your stocking that you don't want to give out. Lumps of coal to me are wastes of money. Here's where you're going to waste your money if you buy these specific tools. 1/2-inch sockets, honestly, of any size. I hardly use them. The only ones I use that are 1/2-inch are my impacts, and that's for the reasons I've already given you. I've wasted my money on all of those 6 and 12-point 1/2-inch sockets. 1/2-inch wrenches are big. Sometimes they're too big to get into the engine bay without getting in the way. Another waste of money are the double flex head TEKTONs that I have here. These are too clunky. They're real thick, and I've never found a use for them. And every time I try to get them onto a bolt, the flex part of the head is just too flexible, and it ends up popping right off. So I really had no use for it. All right, I think that's going to wrap up my gift giving ideas for 2022. These are legitimate recommendations from Yogi here, Yogi's Garage. I use them every day. Take it from me, these tools will put a smile on your loved one's face. So with that said, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the next video.